Greetings, everybody. We're just waiting for people to sign on to this webinar, and I'll let you know in a few minutes when we start. We're just waiting a few more minutes just to collect people to sign on. Thank you for your patience. Just waiting a few more minutes for people to sign on. I guess we have enough people. Good day. My name is Mark Barrett. I'm the Director for Europe and Eurasia Programs at Freedom House, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's event to mark World Press Freedom Day, entitled "When Journalism is Considered a Crime: The Risks of Covering Protest Movements in Eastern Europe and Eurasia." This is organized by Freedom House, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and Reporters Without Borders. The last year has been difficult for all of us. The COVID pandemic has highlighted the inability of governments around the world to provide for the basic welfare of their citizens. And this has been happening in established democracies as well as authoritarian regimes in different ways. In Europe and Eurasia, this has resulted in some remarkable examples of civic engagement where people have stepped up where the governments have failed. However, all too often governments have used the pandemic as an excuse to target dissent, to clamp down on critics. And as a result, the last year has witnessed renewed protests, often in response to COVID, but on a wider range of social and political issues. In some places, governments have responded with brutal and disproportionate force, Russia and Belarus most vividly. Journalists covering these events have been caught in between, often finding themselves targeted, arrested, and beaten for simply doing their jobs. One of the purposes of World Press Freedom Day is to celebrate the courage of journalists around the world for putting themselves at risk in order to tell the news. Today, we have collected a group of panelists from the region to help us make sense of what has been going on from the perspective of journalists themselves. I'm grateful to have Emma Lacey-Bordeaux to moderate this discussion for us. Emma is a journalist, speaker, writer, and producer based in Washington, D.C. She is the Senior Director for Standards and Practices for CNN, and in that role, she is concerned with journalism ethics and with the welfare of CNN's journalists worldwide. Emma, the floor is yours.
Thanks for that intro, Mark, and for kicking us off. I'm glad so many folks can join us. One of the benefits of the Zoom world that we're still living in. And I think we have a phenomenal panel today to look at both the on-the-ground experience of reporting in these times, and as well the regional trends. So I hope you will join in via the Q&A button on your screen, submitting questions. But first, I will introduce our panelists just briefly for you all. First up, we have Kirill Suhoshki. He is the regional director for Europe and TV production for Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Liberty. That means he's responsible for the Russian language programming, the Ukrainian and Armenian services. And he's had a long career, a track record working for Reuters and the BBC. He also has the distinction of interviewing both Hugo Chavez and Madonna. So maybe there's questions about if there's any overlap between those two interview experiences as well. Also from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, we have Alexandra Dinko. And her work was recently recognized in 2019 with numerous awards, including an Edward R. Murrow. She supervises the investigative team in Minsk, and she's done and led a lot of the live stream coverage of the protests there. So we're very lucky to have her here today. We also have Gulnoza Saeed joining us, and she's done tremendous work from around the globe, including in Tashkent and Bratislava. She's covered all kinds of things, including religion and politics, with a focus on Turkey and Russia. And she's here with as the Europe and Central Asia coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. So she'll be able to speak to us broadly today about some trends that she's seeing. We're lucky to have her as well. And last but not least, we have Jeanne Cavaliere with Reporters Sans Frontières. She was a Moscow-based correspondent before returning to Paris and working for Le Monde. She now oversees Eastern Europe and Central Asia desk for RSF. And she too can fill us in on that organization's vital work cataloging what's going on with reporters globally. So getting into it, I want to just start with the specific. Alexandra, folks have been around the world tuned in, plugged into what's going on in Belarus. But if you can, just fill us in, give us a picture. What has it been like for yourself and your colleagues day to day doing the news gathering work to bring these vital stories to a national and global audience?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Alexandra Dinko. Once more, I work for Belarus service of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. And it's an honor for me to start this webinar, this conversation. And it's an honor for me to represent all the Belarusian journalists because, well, you know that as a journalist, you always need to be not pathetic and no emotional, and maybe even sometimes as a surgeon, you feel that you lost all your emotions, but I think that journalists in Belarus do tremendous work every day, and they're just heroes, and they are heroes every day. And you know that I have a rather specific experience, and this my experience and experience of the Belarus service in Belarus. This is only a small part of the picture of repression and torture from the one hand, and courage and professionalism from the other hand that paints a situation with freedom of press in Belarus. And our specific experience means that we were the first in Belarus who began to do live streams. And this became our brand mark and made Radio Liberty very popular there. But the most important thing is that we were the first journalists with whom people were not afraid to speak honestly on camera and talk about their problems and criticize the authorities. And all this was live. And before the elections, we covered almost everything with live streams. We were the first to show the lines of people who wanted to sign for the alternative presidential candidate. We were the first to interview Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who is now the national leader of Belarusians. We were the first to show the funeral of the first victim of the police violence, and so on. And everything, I repeat, was on live stream. And my experience from those time was that you have a microphone, a large professional camera, a press vest, you have accreditation, you feel protected because you do a journalistic job, provide information objectively, and you do everything according to the law. Well, let me be clear that situation with the freedom of press in Belarus have never been even close to good, but still you felt that you are protected by law. But there were some crucial events in the way in which Belarus ended up as the most dangerous country for journalists in Europe, as Reporters Without Borders declares recently. Last year, on June 19, I and my colleague cameraman Andrei Ryabchik were detained during a live broadcast, and there were thousands of people watching this online. And some days after this, on June 25, Minister of Internal Affairs Yuri Karayev said that the protests in Belarus are controlled and coordinated through the live streams of Radio Liberty. And on the same day, a blogger, a consultant for Radio Liberty, Ihor Losik, was detained. Our colleague, he is accused in mass disorders organization, and he faces up to 15 years in prison now. Well, these are the events which show the approach with the authorities use now. The journalists are persecuted because they recall the events which the authorities want to interpret in a completely different way, beneficial to them. So it's difficult to do when you watch these events in live stream. So they try to prevent us from doing this, and that's why the photographers and cameramen are often the main aim of the police attacks. Well, at the end of August, my accreditation was revoked along with the 17 other foreign journalists, and it works now as a professional ban. And now, for the first time of Radio Liberty presence in Belarus, we could not walk legally there. What we have now, our website is blocked, and we lost a lot of web traffic using mirror sites. And journalists are regularly arrested and called as participants in illegal actions. And at least 6 employees of Radio Liberty spent from 7 to 20 days in prisons in terrible conditions, because prisons in Belarus are just hell. For many of them, it ended up with the coronavirus. And what is important for nowadays situation that Radio Liberty journalists and all other independent journalists are daily subject to cynical bullying on official television and propaganda on social network accounts. Well, the details of personal life, appearance, work are discussed there in a cynical way. And the presidential administration newspaper published an article called for a public flogging of independent journalists. And they are not joking, because earlier they called for public hanging of the country's leading intellectuals. The Nobel Prize winner Svetlana Alexievich was mentioned among them, for example. And this bullying is initiated by the channel in the Telegram, which Alexander Lukashenko personally confirmed his press secretary, Natalia Eisman, is directly related to. But we managed to adapt some way to this restriction and even have some advantages of this, losing website traffic. Our social media presence, the number of subscribers have increased also dramatically. On Telegram, which is the most popular messenger in Belarus, we've increased in 3 times in 1 month and got 90,000 subscribers. And we switched to the Telegram first news agenda. Since we have more people there, we put a lot of effort to provide them with breaking news in the format they like most. And we have transformed audience trust in the development of UGC channels. So it forced us to refresh our fact-checking skills, but since we have limited opportunities to work in Belarus in the field, we actively use videos, photos, and information that our subscribers send. And now we do not have opportunity to make live streams from Minsk, but we have developed a channel on YouTube, Svoboda Premium. We have journalists based in Prague. Happily, they do this live stream. I need to say that almost all of our work moved to Prague team. And mostly on this YouTube channel, these are analytical discussion or interviews, but there are about 60,000 subscribers there, and the videos again in hundreds of thousands of views, and became regional trends on YouTube. So it is not even close to the numbers we have previously in Belarus. Like for one of the protests, we had up to 1 million of viewers. But still, we continue to do our job, and it's important to say that every independent media in Belarus, which deals with political and social agenda, meet with repressions now, and with the attempts to close down the media, to fine them, to limit subscription, and so on. And according to the Belarusian Association of Journalists, in 2020, there were 477 cases when journalists were detained. This is only in Belarus. 97 journalists were arrested. 67 journalists suffered from the police action. Well, now 11 journalists are in jail only for doing their job. And among them, our colleague Ihor Losik, he went through hunger strike for 40 days, and he tried to commit a suicide. He had the suicidal attempt. Well, his condition, his psychological condition at first is not very good now. And I repeat that he faces up to 15 years in prison. And he's just blogger. All he has done is to provide information to his subscribers. So the journalists, they just share this fate with the Belarusian people who fight for freedom. And I think they don't want to just witness and carefully record the human rights disaster and social and political and geopolitical disaster which takes place in Belarus, but they have made and make a solid input in the future of country. Because as I understood, the title of our webinar is "What is the price of being a journalist?" But the price of being a journalist in Belarus is the future of the country and Belarusian people.
You covered a lot of territory there. I think, the points you made about the different technologies and the adaptations y'all have taken, as well as the point that you made about people trusting you in order to participate in the live streams, real citizens, I think is important. Kirill, I wonder if we can turn to you and just zoom out a little bit. You're in a leadership role as well. How are you supporting teams on the ground? Obviously, the work is important and needed. Journalism is vital. What is it the day-to-day like for folks on your team?
Yeah, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone, and many thanks for taking part in this event. It's, as you've heard from Alexandra, it is an inflection point, and it is not just the Belarus. Belarus is a very, very specific and extremely violent case of what was happening in the past couple of years. But we need to take a look at the whole region. So I'm, as the regional director for Europe, and oversee the whole TV production as well for RFERL. This is where we come, because this is the attack against the press, and sometimes the targeted attack against us, that is happening in various countries, which is led by Russia, but others see the example that of Russia's actions, and they're very inclined to follow suit. And also, when we're speaking about TV production, it's television, it's live streams that Alexandra's mentioned. That hits the nerve of all those people who is among the authorities in all those countries. So when we speak now about Belarus, we speak about Russia, we speak about Kazakhstan, we speak about Tajikistan, we speak about all those places in the former Soviet space that it is really interesting that we were discussing that it was exactly 30 years ago, less than a week after the failed coup in 1991, where President Boris Yeltsin sat down for an interview with RFERL. And he handed out to our journalist, Mikhail Sokolov in Moscow, he's one of the first decrees after he came to power. That was on August 28th, 1991. And he said, please establish a bureau in Moscow. We are not afraid of you anymore. You are free and safe to do journalism in Russia. That was 30 years ago. And you know, what we're looking now is how the whole history completed that circle. Because 30 years ago, Mikhail Sokolov, when he spoke to Boris Yeltsin, would not probably imagine himself now at the Moscow Bureau. He's still there. And he's one of the leading faces of the Russian service, that he would be facing that we could be kicked out of Russia because we are the ones that the Kremlin can't control. And this is not only a story and the arc, this kind of an amazing and terrifying arc of history of ours. And it's not only the arc of history of journalism in Russia and in the countries around it. In the post-Soviet space, however, we hate that designation post-Soviet space, but it's also the arc of history of Russia and the countries that emerged from the former Soviet Union. So what happens to us now in Russia with the foreign agent designation can happen in other countries like Belarus, where authorities mull this, the same law, and others are also looking. So the thing is, I will speak more about Russia because our situation there is extremely dire, Russians and the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin very quickly understood that all power that they have over population is very easily, I don't know, is all in television. So I remember when we were covering the war in Eastern Ukraine, in Donbass, and journalists who were working there were telling us how the very first thing that the Russia-backed forces did when they captured another village or another town was to go to the TV tower and reprogramming to Russian state television. That was an absolute first step that they did upon the capturing any other village. And that shows their belief in that power. And then they cleaned up the media landscape in Russia, as they did in Belarus and in other countries. There is no independent television in Russia apart from some, apart from TV Rain, which again is based in Moscow and can be closed at any time. And suddenly it was RFRL whom they couldn't control and whom they couldn't shut down very easily. And they cannot take over like they did with UKOS or with MTV or with other companies. And suddenly we became the victims of our success. And Alexandra spoke about the Belarus protest in the first, because we were doing wall-to-wall coverage and Belarusian in Russian. And in the first 6 weeks of that coverage, our live pictures of that live coverage were seen by 350 million people. And when Alexei Navalny came back to Moscow in January this year, we were showing this live to the Russian public. We were with him in Berlin. We were with him on the plane, streaming this live. And he was arrested at the passport control at the Sheremetyevo airport, live on our platforms, beaming it live to the Russian audiences. And then we showed the protest that subsequently immediately started. That was watched by 42 million people. So this is a threat. This is a narrative that they can't control. So what they did is, in the past, literally a couple of months, they amped their pressure for us not complying with foreign agent. They demanded from us that we deface the platforms with absolutely ridiculous and onerous disclaimers, that we pay the fines. So what happens now is every day they do the fines against us, then they do protocols, then we show appeals, whatever. So we are now a subject of 520 legal cases with fines up to, I believe they total $2.4 million. These are the biggest fines against mass media in the Russian history. And they are doing this to force us out. And we don't play this game. So our bureau will be open, our bureau is open, our journalists will be there. And they are all, extremely brave journalists like Alexandra and many of her colleagues who work in different countries, but especially now in Russia, where foreign agent is, we say journalism is not a crime, but in terms of the Russian authorities, foreign agent probably is but we are not foreign agents, and nobody can interfere into our editorial policy. And that's why the Kremlin is not happy. So this is the fight that we are having, and every day is a new deadline. Every day, somebody can go and raid our offices in Moscow, that same office that was opened 30 years ago by Boris Yeltsin. And somebody can seize our bank accounts, seize our equipment. That can happen any day. That can happen an hour from now. And this is the thread that we are working on. But it's kudos to our journalists who come to me. I was in Moscow just a couple of weeks ago, and journalists were coming to me and said, look, we know what this is. I would like to take more responsibility. I can do this. I can do that. This is amazing. And they know that this is a one-way street, because after us, they can't work for state media in Russia, and there is very little non-state media that is left. So this is their fight. So this is now some kind of, as I said, I started with an inflection point for us, Russia, and for Russia as a whole.
Inflection point, yeah. Jin and Golnoza, I wonder if you guys could pick up on that. Maybe we'll start with Jin. Does that shine through in RSF's findings regionally? Talk a little bit about what your organization has seen in terms of these trends.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm very honored to be here with you today. Yet, the World Press Freedom Map has now had so few countries colored in white since 2013, when we started the current evaluation method. So this year, only 12 countries can claim to offer a favorable environment to journalism, and there is no such country in the Eastern Europe and Central Asia region. Unfortunately, this region held onto its second to last position in the regional rankings. And that's in great part because of unprecedented crackdowns on reporters covering protests, especially in Belarus, done 5 at 158 on 180 countries. It is also due to the COVID-19 pandemic's lasting impact on press freedom, and a war in the Caucasus in which at least 7 journalists were injured and reporting was obstructed. Of course, countries in this area, like Alexandra said, were already very tough for journalists, but we've seen press freedom deterioration. Last year, 3 of these countries experimented with a radical way to silence journalists with total internet shutdowns that prevented them from covering demonstrations and deprived the population of access to information. That's the case, of course, in Belarus, but it was the case also, for instance, in Kyrgyzstan after the disputed parliamentary elections in October. Also, it's the Central Asia's best ranked country. What we observed also more generally in the area is that lockdown measures and social distancing rules due to the COVID pandemic provided authorities with additional grounds for obstructing journalists' work in Russia, for instance. Russia is ranked 150 out of 180 countries in the index. We've taken into account a particular crackdown on journalists covering a wave of protests in Khabarovsk in Russia's Far East that lasts since July 2020. We've taken into account also the desire of the authorities to suppress media pluralism with the new amendments on the Foreign Agents Law, as Carol described, and the unprecedented repression of journalists during all pro-Navalny events. I suppose we will discuss about that later. but it wasn't just governments that harassed journalists. We've seen social tensions and expressions of animosity towards the media, especially when health crisis coincided with elections. Reporters were attacked by unidentified individuals in at least 7 of the region's countries. They include Ukraine, where journalists were attacked by exasperated passers-by, by local businessmen and so on. In Georgia, several reporters covering the campaign for the parliamentary elections were physically attacked during clashes between pro-government and pro-opposition activists. In Mardenly, for instance, one of them was hospitalized. And we speak about the best ranking country of the Eastern Europe and Central Asia area at the 60th place. In Armenia also, with the Azerbaijan radio office in Yerevan attacked by about 40 men. These attacks by individuals show that those who announce the news become targets, and it's very worrying.
Yeah, I noted that in y'all's report, looking not just at perhaps actions of governments, but also actions of individuals as well on the ground. That was both interesting and concerning in your report. Gulnoza, I wonder if you want to pick up from this. Committee to Protect Journalists has been looking at these trends, you know, from a historical perspective as well. Kirill located our moment very nicely and poetically in a historical context. I wonder if you want to pick up on this. What trends are you guys seeing? How are people who want to crack down on journalists learning from each other as well?
Thank you, Emma, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here and great to listen to journalists who work in the field. Thank you for your words, Alexandra. It was really, you know, although we're in touch with a lot of journalists on a daily basis in Belarus, in Russia, and other countries, it's really great to listen about how you work in this very difficult environment. Both Russia and Belarus have had a very restrictive environment of free press for many years. In Russia, ever since Putin came to power, in Belarus, as long as Lukashenko has been in office, which is almost 27 years. And whenever we at CPJ speak about the governments that are most repressive towards journalists and media, we always highlight those two countries. But I think the scale and also the frequency of press freedom violations that we saw during the coverage of protests in recent months is something new. And both countries also reached new highs in the number of jailed journalists. At CPJ, every December, we publish a report on journalists jailed for their work around the world. And in December 2020, Belarus was featured for the first time in several years, by the way, with 10 journalists behind bars. And Russia had also a record number of 10 journalists behind bars in December. And I say 10, which sounds like a lot lower than the numbers Alexandra cited from the Belarusian Association of Journalists. That is a press freedom and trade organization that we partner with. And there, if you look at their statistics, it's like more than 400 journalists have been detained. But I can explain it with our methodology, which is we take a snapshot of the situation in prisons around the world at midnight on December the 1st. Every year. So at that very moment, there were 10 journalists in jail in Belarus, but otherwise it's been a revolving door situation because many journalists have been detained multiple times. the same situation in some regions in Russia. In Khabarovsk, which Jean mentioned, some journalists told us that being detained and serving a prison term of several days of administrative arrest, for example, is like a badge of honor for them. So whenever they meet each other, they recognize good journalists by this, by whether they were already detained and sentenced to administrative arrests. But I also have to say this, we at CPJ monitor the situation in a country much closely when it's an election year. I mean, the countries, especially the countries with authoritarian governments. And in 2019, before elections, we at CPJ knew that we would have to keep a close eye on Belarus. And I have to point out that it was not right before the elections and not definitely during and after when these mass detentions started. We noticed the first change in the attitude of the authorities towards critical journalists in March 2020, when a journalist, Sergei Satsuk, was detained for 10 days over his reporting. And that was the first case in several years, because before that, the Belarusian authorities were very smart by detaining journalists just briefly when they were usually on their way to protest, to report on the protest. So journalists would spend time in police custody instead of reporting, and then would be released and usually fined. And fines sometimes were very big for the journalists and their media outlets. And of course, as elections neared, we were issuing statements several times a week, sometimes every day, on multiple journalists detained, attacked, harassed, or intimidated in Belarus. And Russia has been on this path towards a more restrictive press freedom environment even before the poisoning of Navalny last August. But Navalny's decision to return to Russia and his imprisonment led to mass protests in practically all regions across Russia, and that in turn led to more detentions. And 2021 is election year in Russia again, so I think the situation is likely to get worse. And we see this issue with protests and elections, this connection in other countries. And my colleague from RSF, Jean, already mentioned Georgia, Armenia, and Kazakhstan. I remember at some point in Kazakhstan, there is an RFRL correspondent who covers protests, Sanya Toiken, a female journalist, a very brave one. And I had to sit down and then count how many times she was detained in a matter of just a couple of weeks in Kazakhstan, just checking my messages with her and with her supervisor in Prague. So I think I will stop here and give an opportunity to others also to speak. If there are any questions, I would also like to speak a little bit on foreign agent law in Russia, but maybe we should go to questions first.
Yeah, so just a reminder to everybody who's tuned in, feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. I've made a lot of notes, a lot to follow up on. I wanted to go back a bit to the technology question. Obviously, reporting, especially sensitive or investigative reporting, keeping those communications secure is a bedrock. And I wondered if this is a question for the group, anyone who wants to take it, what are you seeing in terms of the digital arms race? How has it become more challenging as these regimes and authorities are using different technologies? I know there's some shifting around when one platform might get shut down. We talked about live stream versus Telegram. Just if anybody wants to reflect a little bit on that, that dynamic of the sort of bedrock of journalism, keeping reporting and sources safe.
I can probably start off because we're seeing this in many countries on our patch, but there are challenges and there are opportunities because before you could listen to somebody's or wiretap the phone at the office or at home and that's it, or cut the phone cord, or something else, and then the progress moves so fast and new platforms appear so fast, and journalists sometimes or often, especially if they're smart, are able to learn how to use them before the authorities do. I mean, even 10 years ago, I was talking to some students or fellow journalists. Can you rewind yourself to 2005? And this was maybe from my age, that was not so long ago. But 2005, YouTube didn't exist, Skype didn't exist. And that all became a feature of our modern life and of our modern broadcasting. So, of course, this challenge is they close down the platform, they close down one stream, and then another one opens up. And then VPNs play the role, and then circumvention software plays a role. Before, during the Cold War, RFERL was just simply jammed. And it will be very difficult to do this now because you cannot, or either you just cut off the whole internet and then there will still be people with satellite dishes, taking it from the satellite, or you can't really, you go to China, you still, you're armed with several VPNs. If one doesn't work, then another one will, and the same with that, and with the broadcasting and with the news gathering as well. This new, and also the opportunity to have this citizen journalism that didn't really exist before, where, everybody with a smartphone could be a journalist, that could be your source, that could be a source of your footage. They don't necessarily need to be on your payroll, but they can provide you with crucial footage. And this is where it starts, and they won't be able to clamp down on all of this. So even if people ask me, what will you do if you are kicked out of Russia? We will still find ways to reach the audiences because we owe it to them. If during the Cold War we were able to do this, we will do it now because there are more opportunities, again, challenges. But I remember, I worked in Reuters in the news agency, and I remember those colleagues of mine who worked, probably like not even 10 years prior to me, but maybe so, and they remember those Betacam tapes and everything, and you needed to book your slot on a Eurovision satellite truck, and just the winner of the coverage race is the one who runs fastest to the EBU truck, which is not the case anymore because you can go live from anywhere. You just plug in, not even a live unit, you can plug into your smartphone and use your 4G, or now it will be 5G, and you can be live from anywhere. Even from within your police van where you're detained. So this is the new reality, and I really, really, what journalists need, and that's what we are keen to provide them with, is training how to use that, how to. It could be online training now. It could be not only devices, but also they have the device. The smartphone is what they need, but how to use, and that's what we provide them.
Yeah, it's critical. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. If I can add to Kira's comment, I'd like to underline the fact that we have no ways to unblock websites, to circumvent internet censorship by means of a strategy in which mirrors are, mirror websites. It means that sites are duplicated, are created on international servers belonging to the world's internet giants, like Google, for instance. And if a country wants to block access to the mirror sites, it must also deprive itself of access to all the sites and services hosted on this service, and it could damage the country's economy significantly and also politically. So it's a kind of thing we do at RSF for some websites in Belarus, for instance, and other countries.
I also wanted to add, if you don't mind, Emma, that I'm glad to hear, Kirill, your optimism, but we also look at how the authorities try to suppress free reporting, online reporting. And the more the technologies develop, the more attempts authoritarian governments make to block websites, to make it very difficult to use different messaging apps. The situation with Telegram, which Russian authorities tried to block, make it illegal for quite some time, but then they stopped their efforts simply because they succeeded by hijacking a lot of content, and that forced people or audiences lose trust in the app and in many channels, which were bloggers' channels on Telegram is one example. But also I wanted to mention another nuance about text in general, not just authorities blocking, but also authorities using different surveillance technologies against journalists, and not just journalists, but also protesters. And the bad news is that there are a lot of countries in the developed world that produce different technology software that they sell to countries with autocratic regimes without really thinking that this technology, this software may end up being used to suppress free reporting, to violate human rights. So at different levels in Brussels, in Washington, we've been trying to raise awareness about that issue. And it's good that we see some big tech companies that produce surveillance technology being responsive, but most other companies, including those that are based in democratic European countries, for example, haven't been responding to demands from press freedom and human rights organizations. And also one other thing I wanted to mention is that whenever a journalist is detained in Belarus and we talk to them, their equipment is seized and sometimes is not returned. Or if it is returned, they don't know if it's still safe to use. So that puts the journalists at risk and also their sources at risk. This is one of very important aspects of reporting, the realities that the journalists in Belarus, in Russia, and other countries have been reporting in.
May I just add some words? I would be happy to share the Kirill optimism, but having this experience in Belarus, I would rather not. That we have this 3 days total internet shutdown in Belarus after the day of presidential election. And yes, everyone in Belarus now use VPN, but I'm not sure that after just some months, our authorities will not find a solution how to track the people who use VPN, because one of the special officers who escaped from Belarus and now he is hiding abroad and he's accused of extremism and some other terrible crimes. And he says that they even have a technology to track the size of photo which is downloaded to Telegram channel, and they track all the traffic they have in Belarus, and they know precisely who is downloading this photo to any Telegram channel. So my point is that the authorities, they learn too, and the gap between the repression, we find a solution, and we have some time till another measure of repression. It shortens every day. We have the example of media Kuku.org in Belarus. They are blocked in Belarus, and they use mirror site with different names every time, and they are blocked like every day. Well, they register it like thousands of these names, and they switch to another name when they are blocked. And this is just a game now between them and Ministry of Information, but this is not a game. And you say that Belarus could not block the internet totally as it is in China. But, you know, some years ago, and even maybe some months ago, the answer that expert would make on this question was rather no. They will not block the internet because Lukashenko also needs technology just to improve his economy and so on. But now the answer is yes, they will, they will, they can, they do not need it. They do not internet. They have enough technology to repress, to track the journalists, to make their civilians program, and so on. So, well, I would rather be skeptical about this. But yes, still we have a lot of opportunities, and there is a courage and professionalism of people who want to continue to do their job in these countries.
I wanted to also pick up on the question of this sort of gets to technology as well as one of the positives. Kirill, you mentioned, you know, audiences of tens of millions tuning in to watch these live streams. I wonder if this is for anyone on the panel, I wonder if you can reflect, clearly there's an appetite for independent news, media pluralism, as someone said. What about popular responses to repression and crackdown on freedom of expression? Are there any encouraging signs anyone's seeing about support for journalists at a grassroots level? Anything to note in that realm, or is it more there's broad fear? How are people generally responding to the crackdowns?
It's kind of a mixed. It's a mixed question, and it will be a mixed answer. It's Margaret Thatcher used to say, "Which people?" So it's we see some support, and we see some support to the perils that our journalists are under in various countries. I think it was Jane who mentioned Azatatune in Armenia. I was there just literally a couple of months ago, even less than that. And I saw from a TV control room the moment that was live when our crew that was live on air was attacked by a mob. And it was a scary moment. And then, you know, they made it safely. They came back to the bureau. I spoke to them. They were shaken by determined. But and then next day, there was a show of support, and there was an online campaign to shame the authorities, shame the mob, and support us. And there were people just dropping by the bureau and expressing the support. The same way as we see now in Russia, there is a campaign now in support of Medusa that was designated foreign agent. We see people who send us messages of support. The question is, how many of them? It's the same as also Russia and countries that surround Russia are in quite a dark place now. I spent 2 months this year in Russia, Ukraine, Armenia. I was traveling there extensively last year in 2020 as well. And there is a general feeling of doom in the country, that everything is going really pear-shaped. And there is also this apathy and depression, that this is not going to get better. So we saw how protests were crushed in Russia, how protests were crushed in Belarus, and this is not a good sign. So they would like to support that, but they don't see whether the authorities will change will change their tax. So I think this is again, as I said, the seminal moment, but not everybody is feeling bright about what is about to come. And also, when it comes to Russia, everything started to develop really quickly, and that's what people are saying. And that, as some of fellow journalists in Moscow told me, it seems like the wheels are starting to come off because it's so speedy, from poisoning of Navalny onwards. And this is a perilous atmosphere where support is needed for journalists. And sometimes that's a dire, sometimes they are in dire situation. You've seen the appeal from Medusa, we will not survive. And then I don't know if you can recall a case of a local journalist, Irina Slavina, in Nizhny Novgorod. That's a city just a couple of 100 miles from Moscow, an easy train ride, and you can make a day trip. And she was there, she was leading, it was a kind of a one-person resistance to state media dominance. So she founded an independent news outlet. And then there was so much repression and persecution of this outlet. And she was fighting all this, and she was determined to win until she couldn't. And in October last year, she went to the central square of that city and self-immolated. And that is the very tragic symbol and image of journalism, of the perils, and also sometimes of despair, and of the support that those journalists need in countries like Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and then the list goes on and on.
Yeah, if I can add to Kirill, yes, local journalists in Russia especially can feel very lonely in their fight for quality journalism. But to put some optimism in this, we can see that, for instance, for journalists in Khabarovsk or somewhere else, there was an amazing participation of the people for paying the fines of the journalists persecuted by the authorities. So it's very, it's an encouraging sign, I think, for journalism to have this support of these people, because sometimes the journalists just put on Facebook that they were fined for their work, and in a few hours they have enough money to pay their fine. Of course, it's not a solution, but that shows a kind of support to journalists. I'd like also to underline the fact that people demonstrated in Belarus as well their support to journalists. It was more last year, I mean, at the beginning of the autumn last year, we've seen demonstrations in support of journalists, persecuted journalists in Belarus. I don't know if Alexandra can tell more about that, but it's very significant. People understand that freedom of the press is very important to support and to check all other freedoms in their country.
Alexandra, do you want to pick up on that?
Well, you know that during our live stream, we all felt a lot of, even not support, but love of our audience, because I was personally always presented with flowers, and some people try to make me some present, and they say how they love Radio Svoboda, how they like us, that they are, and maybe the most dangerous the most dangerous, what they could say that that I saw your live stream and I went to the street to join this event, but after our accreditations were revoked and we could not do the live stream, I would rather say that support is mostly in this UGC content that we receive from our audience, and it is the number of these messages are quite high, but we cannot compare it with the number of messages that national portal Tudbay has. This is the biggest media in Belarus, and it is Belarusian, not American media as we are. And I know that they have like 100 of these messages daily, and they are proud of this support. But as for the regional media, Belarusian authorities are clever enough, and they have this practice to destroy the media one by one. And there was an example with the media Binocle in Brest, which was searched, and the owner of the media is under criminal charges now. And in the town Baranovichi, there is a media, Intex Press. It is very old independent media, and they published an interview with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, which was recognized as extremist, and the editor-in-chief of this media was heavily fined, and now he's on criminal charges too, and now this media is on the edge of survival. I'm not sure they will survive, even having all this. They were one independent media in this small town Baranovichi, but I don't think that people will support them. And the main, like, my offer to the media organization who work with other media, it's that you need to propose some kind of training for the editor-in-chiefs, how to organize a subscription to monetize this well-being of survival of the media. As with this Medusa case, this is the only option for them to stay alive, and for a lot of Belarusian media too, it could be the only option. And it could be the company for the, I don't know, foreign companies who still work in Belarus and could buy advertisement in this media. They still could be motivated to do this. Maybe it could be a way to help this media too.
I loved hearing about the show of support. It's a lot of times when you're a journalist, you don't always get to engage with your audience directly. So that's quite an image that you shared, Alexandra. So we're at an hour. We have potential for another half hour. I see a couple questions from audience folks, but I wanted to ask you all, are there any things that you wanted to follow up on, any questions that you had for each other before we dive into these other questions for the last little remainder of our time together? It's okay if not. I've got questions waiting in the wings. No pressure. I just wanted to check. We've covered so much territory, and I've made a lot of notes. So I'm grateful for all of the time and expertise that you guys have already shared. We had one question about trust, and we talked a little bit about trust already, but I wonder, this is a question for anyone, if you could reflect a little bit about that, the challenge of building trust, especially when there may be active efforts to undermine trust in journalists, and sort of how you see that struggle or effort going.
If I can start, because I think this is a crucial question. This is such an important question now, because the Russian state propaganda of 2021 is very much different from the Russian state propaganda during the Cold War, during the Soviet times. Because during the Soviet times, the Russian state wanted to convince the audience that what they're saying is true. And this is no longer the case. They don't need now to convince the audience that, that they're saying the truth. All they need is to convince the audience that nobody does. And that's their effort. Their effort is to spread 1,000 narratives, extremely confusing, extremely chaotic. So in the end of the day, the audience will say, okay, we give up. Nobody's telling the truth. You can't trust anyone. That's exactly what the Russian state media is doing. And that's what they're doing within Russia and outside Russia. So this is now extremely important for us as credible media organizations to build that trust, to adhere to journalistic principles, to show actually, because again, the difference between Cold War and Cold War 2.0 is that during the Cold War, there was, say, one state narrative and one counter narrative. And now we have 100 state narratives and 100,000 of counter narratives. And as Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesman, said the other day, well, you know, if any media outlet disappears, who's going to miss them? And that he spoke about Medusa. So this is now where we should say, and this is what the New York Times was doing, and any other credible institutions now, is to show, look, this are our principles, this are our trust principles, this are our editorial standards, and this is why you should trust us. And this is where our own margin of error becomes really, really narrow, because we just can't, because we owe it to the audience to be accurate. We cannot relay rumors, because otherwise we would be just all those, megaphones on social media. So that's where our responsibility gets probably even bigger than before, because we don't have a margin for error.
Yeah, no margin, no room for error. That feels very real. Anyone else want to follow up on that question? We have two more, and then I want to make sure that everyone has time for a final takeaway. Anyone else on the trust question? We can move on to the next one then. This is really interesting. I don't know at all the answer to this, but do any of y'all know any examples of outlets going through international bodies for justice? Oh, Kirill, you got it? You got it?
It's us.
Okay.
It's us. So we're trying to fight the Russian legal assault on us. Obviously in Russian courts, but we know that this is futile. You just can't argue with the Kremlin and the court of law within Russia. So I've taken it outside. We have submitted an appeal to the European Court of Human Rights versus the Russian Federation. And we're also pursuing some violations in bilateral agreements that the Russian Federation has. So we are pursuing this outside, but to be honest, I don't have my hopes high, because even if the International Tribunal or the European Court of Human Rights rules that Russia is in violation, there is no way to enforce that. And Russia has a history of not recognizing either the rulings or not willing to abide by the rulings. So the International Court and the International Tribunal found Russia guilty versus, I don't remember, UCOS, and ruled that Russia should pay, I don't remember, $26 billion, $32 billion. That didn't happen. Very recent Navalny rulings by European Court of Human Rights were ignored by Russia. So even if we appeal to the international bodies, and others, I think in Russia, have done the same. There was a very distinct case of Rustavi 2 in Georgia a few years back. But in terms of, when it comes to Russia, we don't have hopes high that, you know, we may achieve, you know, our, you know, moral victory, but I don't think that Russia will recognize the result of that.
Yeah. Yeah, Jean.
Yes, I just want to add that sometimes the European Court for Human Rights condemned Russia, but it takes a long time. For instance, for the website Granny. Granny.ru which was arrested by the Russian authorities by an army of trolls and from which reporters were systematically arrested and harassed by the police during the 2012 demonstrations. The European Court for Human Rights only ruled a decision in favor of Granny last year, in June last year. And so it took many years to get this decision. So it's I'm not pessimistic, but it's very, very slow.
Yeah, things move at different speeds, don't they? Gulnoza.
Yes, just related to everything Kirill and Jean said right now, a couple of questions. I really want to use this opportunity to get, you know, the journalists themselves speak more. So Kirill, what do you expect in Russia, I mean, the situation with RFRL in the next few months? Do you see a scenario that Alexandra described about her service, that they moved a lot of reporting to the Prague headquarters? Is it the scenario you're also looking at? And also the other question for Alexandra, you mentioned the extremism law being used against journalists, and we saw a lot of other laws, particularly, you know, this participation in unsanctioned protests used against journalists. But do you expect something like a foreign agent law being adopted in Belarus similar to Russia?
Thanks, Gulnaza. That would be an excellent question to Vladimir Putin, but he's dropped off our Zoom call. So it all, you know, what will happen to RFRL in Russia in the next couple of months depends on what the Kremlin does. We don't want to leave. They could make us leave. But again, we may leave in terms of if they close down our bureau or seize it or seize our equipment, but we will still have freelance reporters, citizen journalists. We have our Prague headquarters. We have a great multimedia hub in Kiev, where we have the state-of-the-art TV studio, which is probably the best that RFRL has anywhere. So we have some capacities and capabilities outside Russia, but obviously to be in Russia is crucial. So we are there, our journalists will remain there and will report whether the Kremlin wants it or not. It will come with a challenge, it will come with probably harassment. We are ready for different scenarios, obviously I won't go into them, but we do understand that the attack could be brutal and it could be relentless. And we are ready to, you know, we owe it to the Russian audience to keep providing them with independent news. And the onus is on us to find a way to do that. So obviously, you know, this year is crucial, not only for us, but probably for Russia. For some reason, again, as I say, everything moves so quickly and people started asking why so quickly, but so we need to move quickly sometimes as well. So we will see. As of now, we don't want to change anything in our approach, but things may change, and it's out of our hands.
Well, Gulnaza, thank you so much for the question, because this is actually the main maybe direction of the repression, the criminal law. And as for this a new law on foreign agent, as Russia has already, yes, it is discussed in Belarus by the members of parliament. So we are ready that it will be adopted. And but what is going now is that they are just from some steps of signing by Alexandra Lukashenko the new law on media. And well, the practice of interfering with the work of journalists was consolidated in this legislation. I mentioned that the interview with Tikhanovskaya, just a normal, regular interview, was said that it is an extremist by the authorities, and there are journalists who are prosecuted because of that. And what did they do? At first they outlawed all the protesters, like Tikhanovskaya and the Telegram channel, her associates and Telegram channel who support the protesters. And under the new law on media, it is even prohibited to inform about these people and about these sources. So you want to write about Tikhanovskaya, it is prohibited. The other part is if you see a meeting, you need to be sure it is allowed by the authorities, because it will be prohibited to cover illegal events. It means that you cannot cover anything that is not allowed by the authorities. And you know that in Belarus, nothing is allowed. And this rule has already been applied against journalists, because the journalist of Tutbay, Katerina Borisevich, was sentenced to 6 months in prison, and she is now in prison because she published in November last year, she published information that there was no alcohol in the blood of moderate protester, but Alexander Lukashenko publicly stated that the man was drunk. So Katerina, a journalist, is in jail. And the 2 journalists from Belsat TV channel received 2 years in prison for streaming the protest. And the accusation against them are the same as against the live stream of Radio Liberty, as if they are calling on people to protest. And these both very young girls, they do not admit that they did something wrong. And now, according to the new law that they are going to adopt, live streaming from illegal events would be legally prohibited. And the work of foreign journalists will be significantly limited. I think that maybe now even only Russian journalists are accredited in Belarus. But by the future law, that accreditation can be revoked for any violation, even if the journalist crosses the road in the wrong place. Well, and our experts say that everything which could be interpreted against journalists will be interpreted against them. So this is we are in a situation of a mass state terror, and they are going to, which is illegal, but they are going to make it all legal against journalists.
I would like to add, I think, sorry.
Yeah, and I think that Russia is to be prepared to adopt this law as Belarus is going to do, because there were cases when Russia did the same as Lukashenko previously did.
Yeah, they're learning from each other. This is the thing. And what's happening? So Russia is now learning from Belarus how to properly harass protesters and journalists in the most sadistic way. And Belarus and other countries may learn from Russia how to kick out all the undesirable journalists under the foreign agent law provisions. So Belarus has already openly, some officials openly were discussing the foreign agent law in Belarus. and then other countries may equally follow suit. Again, I was in Armenia twice, in February and in March this year. I spoke to media NGOs and to media professionals, and they were openly telling me that, yeah, they fear that the foreign agent law may come to Armenia if a certain political force wins the election in June, and then Tajikistan, and then Kazakhstan. So we're now looking at the pressure campaign in Russia, but it can be very quickly contagious to the whole region. And we will be speaking about the whole region in those terms, because that foreign agent law could be an excellent blueprint. Okay, this is how you kick out RFERL, this is how you kick out any independent media, this is how you do. Russians showed us the way.
Oof. All right, well, y'all, we have 10 minutes left. We did have one question that I wanted to be sure we got to just at the end here. This is from Erica, and she wants to know, what are 3 things that ordinary people and donors as well could do to help support independent journalism in Russia and Belarus? So I don't know if anyone has 3 suggestions or perhaps a handful more. Love to hear them.
Well, as for the ordinary people, I definitely know what they could do at first to be a reader, to be a viewer, to be a subscriber, because every reading, every view count. And you know that when we lost our website traffic, we were so desperate, because you just do not know, do people read you? Do people need you still? And happily we have this increase of traffic or increase of subscribers on Telegram. That's why we know that you still need our work. And another thing which you can do, if it is not dangerous for you, please share the content, the media you like. It is also very important when other people could join to this community and to know the information you trust to. And now it is very important to be to pay for your subscription. There are some media in Belarus who need this, and who have like some kind of a system how to pay for them. This paywall structure, and even if these are very little amount of money, it still counts. It is very important. You show your support, and like 10 subscribers, it means like 10 rubles. It is enough, maybe. The most important, which I previously said, share your content, because you know that the journalists are very limited in their opportunities just to go to the field, and especially when you use professional equipment like camera or photo, you are just a target for these police officers. So if you see something, if you witness something, share with the media you trust to, and this is the kind of support we need.
I think I can add to Alexandra, 3 things. It's so brief, because to me 3 things are immediately springing to mind. For those who outside of those countries, how they can help those journalists to do their job and to survive: financial assistance, legal assistance, equipment.
That is succinct. So we're nearly at the end here. Golnoza, I thank you for raising that question and steering us into some more really important specifics. And I really appreciate the time and energy that all of y'all devote on a daily basis, as well as today, for this discussion. Does anybody have any closing thoughts they want to share? Any resources to point the audience to as we're concluding here? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to what Kirill said. We at CPJ do a lot of advocacy, which is a visible part of our work, but we also provide emergency assistance to journalists in difficult situations, and it does include financial assistance for legal aid if they need to pay their lawyers, or cover medical needs if they were injured during covering protests, for example, prison support if they're in prison and their families need to visit them in prison. We don't help with paying for equipment, but we have partner organizations who do. So feel free to reach out if you're in a difficult situation, and we'll always either help or point you in the right direction. We know how important it is to support journalists, not just through advocacy, but also through grants.
And just to add that we provide the same thing at RSF, and we also can provide financial help for equipment. So, and if we don't have the means to do that, and we also share with partners who can help. But legal assistance and assistance for equipment, it's totally possible, and as well as and help to bypass censorship, to create mirror sites, as I've explained before. And also, what is important is administrative help for journalists who would like to leave the country.
Yes, we also do that, relocation of journalists to other countries. And also we do trauma support, by the way, because, you know, sometimes journalists realize many months later that, you know, they still have these PTSD type of symptoms, and we do help them find counselors and pay for help. And also we help with safety advisories. We can help you get in touch with our security consultants, be it physical security or digital security. So feel free to check our resources on our website. There are tons of them on cpj.org. And also, if you want to reach out directly to me on Twitter, you're welcome.
Those are all fabulous resources, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from folks who want to know more. Alexandra, if people want to follow your work and the work of your team, where should they be going?
It's very difficult even to name the Miro site name, which we use now, because, well, it's really difficult. Previously, we have this Svoboda.org, which is still available abroad, and it is available via VPN in Belarus. But you could use also the official.org, our main website, which cover the Belarus events very thoroughly. And I recommend Current Time TV with Russian language, which also have they have like a very professional team of Belarusian journalists who also help to cover this Belarusian agenda. So just use Telegram, Facebook, and everywhere. I think that every international media now cover the Belarusian agenda, and we are very grateful to them. Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody who joined, Freedom House and RFE, RL, Reporters Sans Frontières, as well as Committee to Protect Journalists for all the time and energy put into this issue broadly, as well as convening this group today. Obviously, plenty to continue to be focused on and working on. So I hope everybody who's tuned in will be in touch with questions going forward. And thank you all for the work that you do and for your time today. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.